Hey folks, thanks for joining me for this episode from the Embellish Pod. If you got here by chance, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button. Hopefully I can be found on any podcasting platform that exists. If you can't find me on a platform, send me an email at embellishpod@gmail.com and I'll try to get that taken care of. You can also find video versions of this podcast on YouTube. You can find all of my links on Instagram at embellishpod or TikTok with the same handle. I have a website. It is www.embellishpod.com. It's a place to pick up these links, episode details, cocktail recipes, maybe even a few music reviews or whatever else I happen to decide that I want to put up. Today I'm going to have Wendy joining me from Archer Eland. If you've been around the whiskey space for very long, you have a good idea of who Wendy is. And she has launched what I think is going to be an incredible brand. And I hope you guys enjoy the conversation as much as I. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you happen to be consuming this particular episode of the podcast. I have Wendy joining me from Archer Eland, and I think that's how you pronounce it.
Yes.
But Wendy, I'm going to give you a chance to just tell us a little bit about who you are and what your brand is and how we ended up on this podcast episode.
Yes, my name is Wendy Peveich. I am the founder and blender of Archer Eland. It is a 100% rye whiskey brand coming out of Ohio. What's cool about it is there's no other grain involved. However, the way I curate these blends, I want to tell a story that rye doesn't have to be polarizing, because usually that's what happens, right? Mm-hmm. It's too minty, it's too peppery, it's too spicy. However, I'm taking people on a journey where we're able to taste through different types of flavor profiles and actually start to appreciate the different nuances of what rye can actually do. And it's pretty cool that I'll be able to do it, coming out from Ohio.
And I was one of those people that for a long time thought I was not a rye whiskey drinker. Because I got something that was way more kind of herbaceous on the front end. Long time ago. And, I'm from Kentucky, and so we're bourbon people, and bourbon is the answer to everything. And then as I kind of got a little older and tried a few different things, I was like, hey, you know what? Yeah. There are these huge varieties. Now, you said a 100% rye whiskey brand. I want to ask, do you mean all of your whiskeys are 100% rye, or you're only going to do rye whiskeys?
Only going to do rye. So The first SKUs that I actually released, and I sent you some samples as well, so you can kind of try them out as well. Those are actually all 100% rye. So I have no intention of doing bourbon.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I have anything to contribute at this point. I did it for about 4 or 5 years, and I felt like I said what I needed to say about it, and I wanted to take on this new endeavor. It's not something that's super easy to do. As you know, rye is very difficult to distill, and it's also challenging to blend 100% rye as well without having any other grains, and it's just pure cask maturation and pretty much for the time. So I took on that challenge, and I love it. As well, Archer Eland is an homage to my mother as well. It's just my way of saying thank you for everything, and Archer is me, Eland is my mom.
Okay. Well, and we'll come back to you've already kind of said what you needed to say about bourbon, but I want to talk about, you mentioned, this is you and your mother. What does that mean, right? So you said that Archer is your mother and Eland is you, or did I get that
the other way around?
Okay, the other way around. But what does that mean?
So it's an homage, like I said. When I was trying to come up with names for my brand, I didn't want it to be too masculine, but at the same time, I wanted it to be enigmatic and alluring. And at the same token, I really wanted to do something, a living legacy for my mother. It's just my way of saying thank you. Culturally speaking, that's kind of what you do. You thank your parents for everything. And so this was my way of doing it. And what other better way to do it through, the nuance of rye. And so, my mother's work ethic, her determination and grit kind of likens to the grain itself, because it grows under really harsh conditions. And so, it was one of those things that my mom instilled in me. And I just kind of wanted to carry that forward in a living, loving letter through these SKUs that I have out there as a collection.
Now, you're launching or have launched a spirits brand. How did you get to launching a spirits brand? Like, how did you get into this? Because you don't come from a whiskey background. You don't have the same last name as a lot of people. And you're a female in the industry, which is also a little bit of a unicorn. It's less now than it was maybe 10 years ago, but female-owned brands are few and far between. How did you get here?
I was never meant to be here. In my former life, I'm actually a cardiovascular nurse practitioner. And during the time of COVID, I worked the front lines, and I needed a creative outlet. I needed a way to disassociate from all the things that were happening. And I needed a way to kind of break from scientific, right, to creative, where I could just kind of sublimate, if you will, for the lack of a better word. And so I just started, like, hey, I had a gift that I was given. It was a bottle of Blanton's, and
Mhm.
I tried it. And I live in Ohio. And so there's this massive intrigue in Ohio for Buffalo Trace. And I was always intrigued. Like, I wanted to try it. I wanted to see what it was about outside of the Blantons that I had. It was so frustrating because they're allocated. And at the time, I didn't know that. So every time I go into the store, you'd never get it, right? Because people are coming in at 4 or 5 in the morning to stand in line and all that nonsense. And I was like, you know what? Forget this. This is stupid. And so I decided to find, something that was budget friendly, because during that time of COVID, I was also putting myself through grad school. And I was like, okay, I got a $50 budget. Let's see what's out there that's just as good for $50. And I will write about it or talk about it so people can know. That way, it's not necessarily like an insult or a slight, but, there's so many other things that are out there than mainstream. And so I fell in love with craft whiskey. And I started delving into that rabbit hole, down the hole I went. And I found so many different types of products, and I started taking pictures of them on Instagram. I am not an influencer. I did not start as one. I hate that word.
Mhm.
And I also started contributing on podcasts as well. And that's kind of how it really started. And then obviously I learned what a barrel pick was, and I went to do one because I'm a visual learner and I wanted to understand the nuances of it. And I did help a previous brand develop their company. I did
Mhm.
that for about 4 or 5 years. And I closed that chapter. And this
Mhm.
is kind of how we ended up landing here. And it was one of those situations where it's like, do I then pour blood, sweat, and tears like I did before into someone else's dream? Or
Right.
do I just take a leap of faith and just bet on myself and get it done that way? And
Mhm.
you know what? It was a lot of reflection and prayer and a lot of days where I was super scared. But you know what? I was like, I only have one life. I don't want to be, on my deathbed wishing that I had done it. And so I decided to take a leap of faith, and I decided to start my own brand. And I always knew I wanted to do rye
Mhm.
just because of my previous travels. I mean, I would see shells, seas of shells of bourbon.
Mhm.
And you'd have a rye offering or a rye skew, one or two, one or two. And it's just here and there. It's not like a cohesive um, shelf space, if you will.
Mhm.
So I was like, you know what? That kind of sucks. Why is it that there's not much variation? There's a lot of pigeonholing that happens within that rye sector. And so I was like, you know what? That's a good one to do. And I also love rye anyway and anyhow. I mean, one of the first ones that I drank was Leopold Brothers, the three
Uh-huh.
chamber rye. My first one was a 2021 Bottle and Bond Christmas edition that he made. And it was one of the most beautiful things I've had. And there's
Mhm.
several other ones that are inspirational, but it's kind of where my passion lies, honestly. And I just want to tell that story through my lens, especially with how I blend things. And I also pull in other elements like
Mhm.
maturation, cask. And that was the fun thing about this particular collection was it's just coming out in its pure form, and I'm just showing the versatility of the grain.
So you're you were a nurse by trade during COVID,
Mhm.
also a grad school student, and developing a budding whiskey addiction, hobby, whatever you want to happen to call it. At what point did you realize like this is not gonna be a hobby anymore? Because to become a nurse, right? You've
Yes.
got years and years and years of training
Yeah.
to be able to get there, and you're a competent individual and you're doing your job well. It's a
Yeah.
huge pivot to move from that to this.
Hmm.
Taking a hobby and make it get into your day-to-day job it's a dangerous and scary thing. Like,
Yeah.
what was the thing that said, "All right, it's time. I want to do this. I want to make this leap."
To go 100% all in.
Yeah.
Again, I was presented with an opportunity to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And I always knew that if it never worked out, I can always land back on nursing. And
Mm-hmm.
at the time, as a nurse practitioner, I could always land on it. I was making really good money, but I was presented with an awesome challenge. I had to open up the state of Ohio. I had to learn the ropes from nothing. The schedule started getting a little crazy,
Mm-hmm.
where I would be working all day and then 5 o'clock, grab your backpack and head to downtown knocking on doors. And then, you come back and then you do, research and development for so many hours and you're sleeping
Mm-hmm.
only 2, 3 hours at a time. You can only sustain that for so long. And so I ended up, taking the leap of faith and going, you know what? I can always come back to this. And I was also experiencing burnout. There was a lot of burnout in the healthcare world during that time. And so I was like, I need to get away for a second. Let me kind of regroup and recalibrate. And I haven't turned back yet. So I've stopped
Yeah.
practicing about 3 years ago.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess that's a fair statement. Once you have the skill set, as long
Yeah.
as you maintain your licensure, there's always sort of a safety net there. But it
Mhm.
feels like the way you're crafting your future,
Mhm.
the safety net doesn't really even exist in your own brain. Like,
Not
it's there,
anymore.
but you're not kind of living with that. And the burnout that occurred to frontline workers during the pandemic is incredible. And I'm a little surprised we're not seeing more people that have these giant career pivots. And maybe the studies will show us later on that there's a lot of people that did a lot of giant career pivots based off of that. But kind of betting on yourself it's an impressive thing when people do it, because most of us don't, right? Most of us, we make safe
Right.
plays, we do all of these things. You said it was scary. Have there been some times kind of along the way you're like, I may have made a mistake, or has it been like, all right, I'm successful and this is working?
Actually, it's funny that you said that. It happened about maybe last week or 2 weeks ago. No, maybe last week. You're always scared.
Mm-hmm.
You are always scared. The juxtaposition in it is that. Are you going to continue to move forward despite you feeling the way that you're going to feel? Or are you going to retreat and go back into that comfort zone? And I'm usually of that notion of pushing myself to some really, extenuating limits, and I make myself very uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it was the last week or 2 weeks ago, I can't remember. I had my first like hyperventilating episode where I bought my first finishing barrels. I've got some barrels that are coming in, and I'm working on some really cool projects. And when I saw the amount of money that I had to pay for that, I was freaking out. Like, dear God, what have I done?
Mm-hmm.
And even today, it was, as much as it was a joyous occasion, being able to procure my solid inventory, saying these are mine. It's terrifying, because you're seeing everything going, the sky is falling, and everything is bad, but you do it scared anyway. You kind of have to have a sense of delusion when you do this, and it's not for the faint of heart. I wouldn't recommend a lot of people
It's
starting their
yeah,
own.
it's audacity, right? Like the
Yeah,
audacity to believe that you can, and then you
yeah.
do, which is always like, it's really encouraging. That's the conversations that I really really like to have, are when people are like, I've talked to a few folks who are like, if they get to the end and there's several
Mhm.
places along the course of their journey where it's like, if I'd have known now or known then what I know now, I might have actually quit at that point in time. But
Right.
sometimes it's, being, too stupid to quit, or too stubborn to quit, or believing in yourself enough, right? That becomes the thing. And doing all of that from a self-taught perspective, right?
Yeah.
Because you're coming from a healthcare background into this, aside from maybe being able to prioritize the next most important thing to do, it doesn't feel like there's a ton of overlap there. What's that like, going from, completely whiskey novice to working as a brand ambassador, and then launching your own thing,
Mhm.
right? Being self-taught.
It was an incredible journey, I'll tell you that much. Obviously, when I first started, like I said, I stumbled into this. It was an accident, never meant to be here. However, I discovered that I was able to decipher flavor profiles pretty well, very acutely. And I remember throughout my journey, sometimes you are in conversations. I was very blessed to be able to be in rooms and places, where I'm probably standing next to, Fred Johnson, or, I've got Steve McNally over there, or, those types of situations. And then you start to hear those conversations, and then you kind of hear certain things and you pick it up. You retain it and go, I need to research this a little bit more. And so that's what I used to do. I watched videos on YouTube of Todd Leopold talking about the three-chamber process, and him having, he likes to sit on his porch, have a cocktail with his mom, and read through tax documents, or watch the likes of, Trudy Ann from Mount Gay, Nancy Fraley, anything I could get my hands on, I would do it. I read Heather Green's books, Lou Bryson, who I just met, I read his book as well. So it was one of those situations where if I heard something, I would, do my best to research it. Distilling, same thing. I've spent time with distillers, even here in Middle West, where my company is based. I will spend, 1 to 2 days a week or once a week, and I'll go to our distillery and I hang out with the distillers. and they teach me so much, and that's kind of how I did it. And it's one of those things that you have to want to do it in order for you to get better. I never think of myself as an expert. My journey is not static. It's dynamic. It's non-linear. And so I make sure that I'm constantly reading. I'm constantly researching, and just to make sure that I stay somewhat acute and knowledgeable in what I do. So the self-taught journey as well is something that you can tie back into with fear. Is, it's scary as hell because you don't want to talk or say something that might be incorrect. But I'm of the notion that you have to educate yourself in order for you to impart something that is value, nuggets of gems to the next people that are coming either behind me or with me, and so on. So it's been a cool journey. I'm still learning.
Yeah. And so, you helped build a different brand, and then did you go straight into building Archer Eland, or was there kind of a time in the middle where you've done this other thing, now you're kind of pivoting your career again, but in the same industry at this point?
It was a transition. It was a transition. Not that I want to go into it too much,
Mhm.
but it was a transition that happened. I could tell the sun was setting, and it's one of those things, whenever you have like premonitions and things like that, I could see it coming, and I just didn't quite understand it. It's almost like you have this conscientious dissonance that's happening with you, but you kind of push it down, and you're like, nah, it's probably just me, tired or something like that. But
Right.
the universe has a funny way of showing itself to push you into such discomfort and forces you to reflect, forces you to kind of confront certain things. And for me, it was a transition. It wasn't necessarily, one day I want to start a brand. It was a transition that happened.
And so, and if I remember correctly, right, but kind of in the in between, there was a degree of like of not degree, a period of where you were kind of doing some consulting and some
Mm-hmm.
reviewing. While that was happening, I mean, obviously you have a very strong palette, and you built the appropriate language to be able to communicate with the folks that work in the industry, right? You're self-teaching, but you're self-teaching at a very, very high level from what I'm able to see, kind of as an outsider looking in.
Yeah.
But were you still kind of holding Archer Eland in the back of your head, or were you just saying, okay, I've gone from this thing, I'm going to do some consulting, and then it kind of unveiled itself to you? Or did you always know you were going to build your own? I mean, I think you sort of said this, but you kind of have your own thing.
It happened simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
They were kind of in tandem at the same time. So I was consulting, I was doing reviews, I was actually helping various clients. I had one client who was doing a startup, an AI startup for whiskey, which is kind of cool. That was a great experience to be in there. So from time to time, I do help them out. And then I also have another client that I help inventory their stock. So, I will travel to whatever location I go, and I work with them, and we do sensory on their inventory, and we try to, you know, create lots so that they can understand how to blend their own components. And then during all that, as I was consulting, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. So I started working on it, started like doing all the research, and I had someone to help me. I had a mentor at the time, Ryan Lang, who owns Middle West, who was helping me kind of understand the nuances of the business side, because it's completely different when you start a brand and when you start doing the business side of things versus the consumer side of it, and also the entertainment side of it. So there were a lot of things that I had to understand and what comes with it, because being a brand owner, it's a lot. It's a lot of responsibility and undertaking. So that took me a while. So I was doing it in tandem at the same time.
So, and I think it's a pretty easy decision, but
Mm-hmm.
tell me, how does being a person who's going to start up a brand, your options, you have a good number of options of finding places that could do the distillation and you could partner with to be able to
Mm-hmm.
make it. And you're working with Middle West.
Mm-hmm.
How did you come to say, Middle West is the decision for me?
It made so much sense. And like I mentioned to you earlier, when that premonition was happening, certain things kind of came into place, and I didn't quite understand what was
Mm-hmm.
going on at the time, up until my transition happened, and I was like, oh, this is what it is. And I always knew for a very long time that I wanted to come back. Columbus, Ohio is my second home.
Mm-hmm.
And I always knew I wanted to come back home. I always knew I wanted to do something out of Ohio. And it was just a perfect fit for me to partner with Middle West Spirits on so many levels. I have an incredible team when it comes when it comes to the contract distilling side, the support is amazing. And then obviously on the business side for that, it's just me. I'm a team one of one. I'm running everything right now on that end. So it just made a lot of sense to do that way.
You said Columbus is your second home.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't sound like a Columbus accent. Where's the first home?
Everybody says that, like, oh, where's that from? So I'm actually half Malawian, half Zimbabwean. So I grew up abroad. And, I went to British Catholic school. So hence the little twang that I have there. But yeah, Columbus, Ohio is my second home. I've been here for decades. I'll be sharing my age, but yeah, I've been here a long time.
Yeah, not asking for your age. Just you kind of get the you selected rye as the whiskey that you wanted to make, and you've kind of indicated a number of reasons why. Life you could have chosen single malt, you could have chosen non-whiskey spirits. Specifically given how the market's going, and at least from the conversation I'm having with people, kind of being in your shoes. Contrary to a lot of people's thoughts at this point, it is not a terrible time to be starting a brand. If you started like 5 years ago and bought everything whenever it was way, 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 way more expensive, life's a different story. But building around rye is interesting because there's not a ton of people who are saying, we're just a rye company. Like that's all we're going to do. Is this a firm exclusivity where the only thing that's ever going to be rye, or will you explore other spirits?
I'm already exploring.
Not bourbon.
I'm already building out my portfolio.
Yeah. Do you have anything, kind of on the horizon that you're thinking about? Or are you years out on many of those?
Next spring.
Okay. Can you say what you're looking at, or okay? Yeah, that's perfectly fine. It is what it is.
Yeah.
I feel like it's an interesting time to be in the spirit space and seeing some of the other things that might percolate to the top, because kind of bourbon has been king for a while, but you can also get tired of bourbon. Like it's perfectly fine to say, I've had a lot of bourbon, I'd like to do something else. I want to drink some Armagnac, or I want to drink some any number of other things that are out there. Landing at 100% rye is also kind of a unique process, because there's not a ton of people that are doing that. And you're using what kind of unmalted and malted rye, if I remember correctly.
95% rye and 5% malted rye.
Did you kind of set out with that in your head, or that's just how it sort of worked out?
No, that's exactly how I designed it. And it's interesting that you said that. And I'll just backtrack a little bit. I know everybody's like, oh my gosh, doom and gloom. However, the way I built this was with purpose and intention. It's not just one of those things where it's like willy-nilly and I'm going to make a lot of money. This is a marathon. It's definitely not a race. And what's going to happen is, it's kind of like I'd mentioned it before in one of my podcast interviews, is the fact that, you think of it like the stock market. We have Bollinger Bands in place. Bollinger Bands are kind of like your circuit breakers, right? They're able to control how the flow of the stock market is going to go. It's the same thing that's happening right now. There was a huge boom, especially during the time of COVID. All that's happening right now is the fact that things are starting to level out, and the people that were in it for the wrong reasons are going to be shaken out, right? And obviously there are going to be some situations where other entities probably overprojected, or whatever the case may be. However, with that being said, when I designed Archer Eland, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I traveled so much and I'd seen enough markets to know that there was a need and there was a problem that needed to be fixed. Pigeonholing is number one. A lack of diversity within the rye section per se. And if you do happen to have rye, more than likely it's going to have one or two other grains and so on. But to have something that is completely one grain and probably processed completely differently, not many people are doing that. So there was a lot of intention behind that. And a lot of people say, man, you have a lot of balls, starting a brand at the time like this. Yeah, this is the perfect time to do it. Warren Buffett always says when people are freaking out and getting scared, that's when you put the pedal to the metal and you go. And when people are being, the opposite way, that's when you become conservative. And so I knew what my chances were when I started Archer Eland. I knew I could get shelf domination because I have 4 SKUs coming out. So I'm able to get different palettes, preferences, proof points. And so you can speak to that. So there's a lot of purpose and intention that came in with it. And it was very calculated and researched and examined. And so I knew it was going to work because, when we're looking at on the business side of things, you're looking at things like, the compounded annual growth, which is at the CAGR. You're looking
Mhm.
at, okay, what is the total market share for American whiskey and what is the sector for rye and that? And so there's so many other factors that kind of come into place that help you make those calculated decisions. I know a lot of people are like, oh my God, but this is bad. And it's like, no, as long
Mhm.
as you position yourself in a manner in which you're able to appeal to the consumer with authenticity, intention, and purpose, you're going to be fine. And I knew I was going to be all right.
Yeah. And it, as a non-distilling producer,
Mhm.
if you have the means, because there's at least from what I've seen, non-distilling producers, you kind of got two categories. You've got folks that are building a legacy, and you
Mhm.
have folks that are building to sell, right? And if you're building to sell, you're trying to get as much into the market as possible. You can get your share, you get some interest from, Diageo or whoever it happens to be,
Yes.
and they come in and they say, "Here's $500 million," and you walk away. Right? That's a perfectly acceptable business model. There's nothing wrong with that, but it also leads you to make certain decisions on how you acquire things. Whereas if you're building a brand for legacy, and a year ago you spent $2,000 on 5-year whiskey barrels, and this year they're $500. The legacy brand could just buy more and say, now my overall average cost of barrels has gone down, because it's just like
Mhm.
stocks. This is the first podcast I've had where someone has used Cogger or Bollinger Bands as a part of the discussion, and I absolutely love that. That's
I
fantastic
had
because
to.
it's
I
true.
mean, it's interesting because, like you said, my journey has never been, a
Mm-hmm.
static one, right? I went from nursing to, interest to, being a brand ambassador and a national brand ambassador. And, you know, those stages are completely different. And so by the time I'm coming into the business world, I'm having to kind of have a different lens altogether. And so those types of things, those analogies actually helped me understand how the market flow is going.
Mm-hmm.
So those things actually help me kind of read the room and help me navigate the waters in a manner in which I'm staying conservative, I'm staying reasonable and realistic, but still wanting to put out
Mm-hmm.
something that's absolutely killer for the consumer.
Yeah, and I guess if you're gonna build something that is an homage to your mother, as
Yeah,
well as a recognition of your own identity, then you're
yeah.
probably gonna want to stick with it for a while, right? You don't want to put your name on something and then sell it.
Yeah, sell it and
People
then walk
usually have a
away. No. And so,
right.
with that being said, yes, this bit I can tell you, and I thought I wasn't going to do it till maybe 2, 3 years down the road, but I am building a legacy. And you always hear people going, well, I'm seventh generation, eighth
Mm-hmm.
generation, ninth generation. And we honor that so much and go, oh my
Yep.
God, this family has transcended time,
Mm-hmm.
transcended so many world events, and they're still standing. But
Yep.
I think it's pretty cool to be in this lifetime where you see someone who is first generation.
Yep.
I'm African, number one, and to say that it's unheard of, does that make sense?
Right.
And so I'm the first
100%.
generation, I'm the first of my name, putting in the stakes and going, this is supposed to outlast me, outlast you for generations to come. And so, with that being said, at the end of the year, I'll be actually laying down my own new make.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in the process of researching different types of rye I want to work with. I already just finished yesterday. It was a long day yesterday. I think I slept at 2 in the morning because I was working on barrel modeling. How do
Mm-hmm.
my barrels look? How are we going to grow it? So I'm starting to already do the scaling. This is not
Yeah.
just a one and done type of situation. I'm literally putting stakes down. This is
Mm-hmm.
first generation, and it's a fascinating thing that I think is cool. Like, yes, we love and admire those ones that have transcended time, but how many times have you ever seen a first of its name
Yeah.
and it continuing to grow as a legacy? Whereas, like you said, to build something to sell, that's
Mm-hmm.
totally fine. That's okay.
Yep.
But to actually see someone go through in real time, putting stakes, first generation, let's go.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. I've never seen it been done before like that. So I'm pretty
These are the
proud of
kind of things that like get the at least my subsection of the whiskey nerddom, the people
that.
that are around me, they're like, these are the things that we're excited about. I mean, we all
Yeah.
want to taste all of the best expressions and do all of these things, but I like seeing names pop up that say, I'm building this so that way we can
Yeah,
have this conversation today, and we're going to have it again in 10 years, we're going to have it again in 20 years, and then somebody behind me is going to be doing the same conversation 10 years after that, right?
exactly.
Building something with intention and with expectation of success is
Yeah,
what I love to see specifically. And you're doing a lot of intentionality. And so the name is really intentional, and we probably do need to talk about your expressions as well, right? Because
yeah,
you've got 4 SKUs in the market.
Yes, I do.
Kind of, I guess we'll start with the I don't want to say the bottom end in proof, which is,
Mm-hmm.
I think Solstice is 104. Is that right?
Solstice is 104. Yes.
Okay, so how did we build out Solstice from a naming perspective and then from a flavor profile, or did it go the other way where you built a flavor profile and you said this is Solstice?
Actually, this very first collection of Archer Eland is very near and dear to me. It's very special. Like I told you about the transition, I went through a really difficult time. And so when I was building Archer Eland, Solstice was the one I created first. And I named it that because I was wanting to hold on to hope. I was
Mm-hmm.
wanting to hold on to that warmth, that there's something else on the horizon. There was a lot of, psychological and emotional things that I was going through at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so Solstice just stuck. It was perfect. And at the time, as a blender for me, I actually blend from end to back. So I have to reverse engineer everything, and it takes me forever to do it. And I knew that Solstice had to be light. Solstice had to be delicate. It had to be pleasant. And so I wanted it to be citrus and floral forward because rye and citrus and floral, they just go well. They're hand in hand. And so that's how I built it. And when I did do that, and this is where I'm going to start to nerd out as we talk about each expression, I took 4-year barrels, not that they were bad or anything like that. They were gorgeous. I took 4 years and 7-year barrels because I wanted to create complexity. In each of the SKUs, there's complexity and there's layers.
Mm-hmm.
And when I would blend, I would eat food. I would eat pizza. I would eat, salad, garlic, and see what would happen because I'm not necessarily just going to drink whiskey by itself. Sometimes some people
Mm-hmm.
have it as a dessert or whatever the case may be. And so with Solstice, that's how I created her. And 104, I did it on purpose because, again, during my travels, these are the notes that I would take. I would look at the store. My job at the time was I need to know where is my product, who's my competitor, what's the pricing, what's the placement, how do I speak about my product in a manner in which the consumer can understand it and be converted enough to purchase it. So these are little nuances that I took with me. And I knew that when I went into the stores, typically, when you go into the store, you see rye like 80, 90 proof, 80, 90
Mm-hmm.
proof, 80, 90 proof. And I was like, you know what, that kind of sucks. How about we push the envelope just a little bit? And so when I created Solstice, I started at about 100 and I did 2 proof point increments is what I did. And so when I do the 2 proof point increments and you wait for homogenization and all that other stuff, at 104, it hit the spot. It's stunning. And it's a perfect time to drink it right now because it's spring. So those citrus, those floral notes are coming through so beautifully. And you do have a little bit of creaminess that comes through. And the nice thing about rye on Archer Eland, all of my ryes right now, they don't have that burn. They don't have that ethanol, that you get in your nares are just done. It's just delicate and it's flow.
And you said something in there that whenever you're building your blends, you just live your life like you normally do from a consumption perspective, food and beverage or whatever. And usually whenever I haven't done some in a while, but usually when I sit down to do tasting notes, I try to drink it 3 different times, 3 different days, 3 different sets of glassware, because unless we're trying to be really, really precious and always drink exactly the same way every single time, it's going to be with dinner, out with friends, sitting by a fire. All of these environmental influences are going to impact it. I'm just looking for through lines, things that of those 3 experiences are similar enough that I feel, okay, this is it. I appreciate that. And I watch you're building a blend from 4 and 7 years. And for a rye, at least most consumers are like, rye is pretty good at 2 years. At 4 years, it's even better. And if we were talking about bourbon, they'd be like, well, that's young. And maybe 4 years for rye is really not maybe that young. It takes on age differently. It's not that it ages fast. It's just a different component.
It's a different type of maturation. And, also I would be careful at 2 years because then you also start to take into consideration, well, what's the style of distilling?
Mm-hmm.
Are we going pot still column combination? Right. How is it done? Is it cut a certain type of way? Because you also have to be very careful about that. If it's cut appropriately, then at 2 years at rye and also barrel char, those things come into play as well. So as long as those things are, consistently and purposefully selected, then 2 years rye is going to do that. And by that 7th, 8th year, you're going to get a beautiful sweet spot on rye.
Yeah, and I guess when I think about 2 years, I immediately think about, the very first release Peerless ever did was a 2-year rye, and it was well made. And honestly, it won't compare to their current rise because their current rise are much older now, but it
Yeah.
was a phenomenal offering for a 2-year whiskey. So you have to kind
Oh
of
yeah.
like switch your brain a little bit when you think, or at least I have to switch my brain when I think about rye versus, bourbon,
Yes.
and how bourbon is going to pull flavors versus rye. But I think from a business perspective, you're blending 4 and 7 years, so it helps you do a little bit of cost control. But you also are looking for your flavor components that a younger whiskey will bring this and an older whiskey will bring that. It's sounds like a really, really well put together whiskey. I got an opportunity to kind of sip a little bit of it last night, and the citrus didn't hit me nearly as much as the floral herbal of it, and not herbal like dilly herbal, but on the like
No.
the tea end of the spectrum herbal, right? Where you expect
Yeah.
the more floral portion of herbal, I guess is the word that I was looking for. And it really was. It was beautiful. It is a perfect whiskey for a spring
Mhm.
flavor. At least it was for me. Your second one that is sitting out is Aurora, right? Is that the
Aurora.
the next step up?
My problem child, Aurora.
The problem child.
Aurora is my problem child.
So
Jeez.
are we looking? Is this like a constellation Aurora? Or are we talking about like Disney Princess Aurora? Because I gotta
No, Northern Lights. So
gotcha.
when I blend, sometimes I tend to see in colors.
Okay.
And so when I blended Aurora, I could see like green, blue, purples, and browns. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember I was sitting out there at the table, and our comptroller Kathy came over, and I was like, "The blend is done." And I usually what's nice is you get to have different people taste your product.
Mm-hmm.
And she was trying it at the time, and I was like, "I don't know what to name this." And I was like, "This is what I'm seeing when I blend sometimes." And she goes, "Oh, that's easy. Call it Aurora because of the northern lights and the color that they show." And I was like, "Duh, that's cool." However, why I love Aurora, and as much as she's my problem child, this is where you start to, appeal to the rye enthusiast, the purist.
Mm-hmm.
And you get these beautiful, like Granny Smith apples. You can actually have the green skin tanginess and then the flesh of it. It turns into these fudge brownies and coffee. You'd think that combination doesn't work, but it does. And what's crazier about Aurora, and the versatility of her, is the fact that if you were to take a rock, put it into your glass, and then pour ice, and you pour it over and you let it sit for maybe 3 to 5 minutes, she
Mm-hmm.
actually starts to turn into like the stone fruit, like these plums, nectarines. It's pretty cool. But she, during this time we're entering the chapter, there's, and I always mess up my biblical references, but I think it's Aaron who's on the mountain and he's fighting an angel. I'm
Mm-hmm.
now going through an internal battle,
Mm-hmm.
where you're like, what the hell do you think you're doing? Do you really need to start a brand? Are you crazy?
Uh-huh.
Are you good enough? Because
Right.
what makes you think you're good enough? And you start to play back some, certain things that are not pleasant, but it that was the time I was just kind of going through that internal struggle, that internal battle. Like,
Mm-hmm.
do I have what it takes? And I think you start to get into your head a little bit because you start to want to kind of wander outside of your blinders and go, but so and so is doing this, but so and so is doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And Aurora taught me that. And, you know, it was a difficult one, and it was a dark time, but I pulled it through, and I have a great blending team. And it was difficult because this collection as well are partial barrel blending. So you take like 10% of one,
Mm-hmm.
5% of another, and so on. I'll never do it again like that. I'm actually going through whole barrel blending.
Right.
But during that time, that's what Aurora taught me. That was a painful struggle. And
Mm-hmm.
when I did that, we had to recalculate her, I think, 4 times. Because
Mm-hmm.
when we first did the initial yield, it was going to come up to 40 cases. I've already blown through 40 cases.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to go back 4 times over. And towards the end, I was like, you know what? Forget this. And I was like, whatever was left over in those 7-year barrels, dump them in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I started out my business with 20 barrels. And so at 20 barrels and an average of 4 to 5 barrels, you're going to use like a 350, 380 tote, an
Mm-hmm.
IBC, which is it's a bulk container, stainless
Yep.
steel. And so I was fed up with her. I was like, I'm done with her. Just dump that. And we did it. And we, kind of mixed it up a little bit, and then we let it sleep. And then maybe 2 days later, I came back and I was like, this is really good. And so that's how Aurora came to be. And she's also a blend of 4 and 7 years. But this time, when I'm showing the story as maturation, right? We have warehouses here at Middle West. they were in different parts of the warehouse, and I start playing around with temperature fluctuation as to where those barrels are sitting and what floor. And so that was a fun project to do. It helped me out. I'm actually falling in love with maturation science right now of
Hmm.
warehouses and temperature fluctuations and swings. So I've got a couple experiments that are happening here at the distillery, which are pretty cool. And they're actually yielding beautiful results. And so that's kind of how Aurora came to be. And I'm sorry if I'm talking too long about
No,
nerding out on this stuff,
that's
but
perfect. This is. I was talking to Zach Johnston a month or two ago from Blackwood, and he's a
okay.
former journalist, and so I would ask him a question, and he would talk for like 8 minutes, and he was like, "Is that?" And I was like, "No, this is perfect. This is whenever you can ask a question and somebody can tell their story, I
Yeah.
love it. You said in there, there's like a imposter syndrome,
Oh, yeah.
existential dread. You're in a place where comparison is becoming a thief of joy in your life.
Hmm.
Aurora being your problem child from a
Hmm.
parenting perspective, oftentimes, I have a couple children. The more difficult child often forces you to kind of expand how you parent and how you deal with things in a really positive way. And I hope it. I got a chance to taste that one last night as well. I
Yeah.
didn't make it to the other two yet, but I definitely got into the chocolate nutty edge of it is where it set with me in the very small amount that I had last night, and I'm really kind of excited to see the other two. Right, and so you've
Yeah.
also got one called Cashmere and one called Suede, and I'll let you
Yeah.
tell me which one you want to talk about first because I love the
Yeah.
names. I'm interested to see what they mean since I don't have the flavor profile yet.
Yeah. So, like I said, Aurora forced me to grow. She
Mm-hmm.
forced me to be a little bit more confident. And then when we hit Cashmere and Suede was supposed to be one product. That's what was supposed to happen. And when I did I took the barrel lots. And, some places they'll just go, hey, we're just going to pull that whole lot, bring it down, blend it. I don't do it that way. So I actually will evaluate each and every barrel. I know it's
Mm-hmm.
monotonous and tedious and everybody thinks it's so glamorous. It's like, no, it's a lot of work. They were supposed to be one lot, one blend, and I put them together. Dear God Almighty, they were terrible. And I had to split up my pot. I think it was a 9 barrel lot at the time because I started my business with 20. And I had to start all over again. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
gosh darn it, all over again. This sucks. And I ended up doing recipe after recipe, blend after blend, and then I landed on this beautiful flavor profile where it's so thick and not oily thick,
Mm-hmm.
but like the mouth feel, it almost envelops you. And as it did that, I have certain sweet spots on my palate. Once I hit that sweet spot, it kind of it sets this alarm with me, and I'm like, oh, I'm onto it. I'm on it. And
Mm-hmm.
when I tasted Cashmere, that was the first time I was like, fuck yeah, I'm good. I'm gonna be okay. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to be okay. It was my first time being able to kind of be at ease and be like, okay, this is gonna be fine. And Cashmere is like thick and sweet, luxurious. Think of like donuts, think of vanilla custard,
Mm-hmm.
toasted marshmallow. It's the first time I've ever tasted a 100% rye like that. That's sweet. And I actually poured that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I have here next to me. And it was so great when it came out. And so that's how it came to be. Cashmere is 7 years old at 126 proof. Last year was a beautiful summer. It was really, really hot. And so we ended up taking my barrels, palletized them, we unbanded them, palletized them, and had them sitting on the northern end of the wall where it literally is sitting by the wall. So you're going to get sun all the way through. And
Mm-hmm.
you'll get a little bit of aeration because we do have cinder block walls. And so that retention of heat was
Mm-hmm.
great. And so I lit them right through the summer. And what's cool about Cashmere and Suede, their fill dates go back to 2018 on 9/11. So
Oh
I
wow.
actually waited for 9/11. And after that, that's when I harvested the girls. So it's special to me. Military is near and dear to me, and first responders and so on. So it's a great commemorative gift for, people that work those areas. And once Cashmere was done, I was like, you know what, for shits and giggles, let's see what happens with the remaining lot. Just wanted to see. And here comes Suede. Suede is 126 as well, 7 years of age. But Suede is like sweet tobacco.
Mm-hmm.
It's leather. And a lot of people, and it's funny, like, you hear people on social media, what do they mean it's leather? Have you not smelled leather before? Like, It's a thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
a thing. So, you know, like that beautiful soft powdery leather, like on a messenger bag, and you open it
Yep.
and it's soft
Yep.
and velvety, and you smell it. That's exactly the smell that
Mm-hmm.
comes through. And so it came through, and then you get a kick of the oak, and then you kick of the rye.
Mm-hmm.
It's gorgeous. And you know how people talk about cigar cut and all this other stuff. No, it comes out that way without anything. And what's so beautiful about all these four expressions is that this is the first story I tell of my transition. And I tell it in an abstract way, of course. That's number
Mm-hmm.
one. Number two, I learned the art of partial blending, right? Taking
Mm-hmm.
bits and pieces of a barrel, almost like you're quilting, right? And then the other thing with this particular collection, excuse me, there's no secondary cask. There's none. It's just the cask that it went in
Mm-hmm.
and for the time. And you play around with the char, you play around with the barreling and, the maturation of the warehouse, temperature swings.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it was. And obviously water. Obviously we use deionized water. And when we do our blends,
Mm-hmm.
deionized water is nice because it doesn't give you any other attributes that are going to mess up the integrity of your distillate. And so this is why this particular collection is so special to me, is because it's telling the story of the next chapter of my life. But during that, synapse, right? It was rough. It was
Mm-hmm.
very rough, and I'll be vulnerable to that extent and say it was rough. But I came out swinging and okay,
Mm-hmm.
But they're great. I really like them. I like all of them. I don't have like a
Liked the quilting reference, and I'll have to tell my wife that way. I'll be like,
favorite.
hey, you should drink this whiskey with me, because she made a quilting reference, because my wife loves quilting. So you've got these four expressions that sit in the market. They kind of run a band of price points.
Mm-hmm.
All are easily reasonable for what's in the glass. And part of the reason I wanted to kind of lean into the conversation about the names is some people go one direction, some people go another, and these names feel very sensory related. And I
Uh-huh.
can relate to that heavily, right? Because you've got a name like Cashmere and Suede, and my brain immediately goes to one place. It could be just a fashionable name, but I go to kind of thick and warm and luxurious
Yep.
for Cashmere, and Suede has that distinct, and this happens to me a lot, where leather and tobacco often play with each other in whiskeys, at least from,
Yes.
from my palate perspective. And when I think about tobacco, so I'm in Western Kentucky and we do dark fire tobacco. And so I don't necessarily think about tobacco from the sense of like a cigarette or pipe
Mm-mm.
tobacco or whatever. I'm thinking about a sort of sweet fermented type smell of tobacco
Yes.
that
So for
exists. And
me,
that's,
I grew abroad. I grew up
mm-hmm.
abroad. Zimbabwe was one of the biggest exporters of tobacco. So we
Mm-hmm.
had a tobacco auction floor. It was huge. I remember as a kid, you'd see the different sections as to how the leaves are harvested. So you'd have the green, and then it starts to change with the dehydration that they start to do. And it's so fun because all those smells are
Mm-hmm.
completely different. And so for me, I think of like, a pipe, and you put that tobacco in there. It almost comes out like this sweet smell, like almost like myrrh
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. And
Yeah.
that's what it took me back to. It took me back to my childhood when, we would see tobacco being grown, you seeing it being
Mm-hmm.
dried. That's the tobacco I'm talking about. A lot of people may think cigarettes, not necessarily.
Right. Or cigars. So
It's
I mean, cigars is
well,
probably the more appropriate thing
cigars
there,
is,
but
is a good
yeah.
thing as well, but not necessarily cigarettes, because cigarettes is more accurate, isn't it? It's a little
Mm-hmm.
bit more sharp.
Yep.
But this is not that. This is like you want to sit there and have a nice cigar, and
Mm-hmm.
then you have a beautiful accompaniment. It's really nice. And someone said to me, "Oh, this is a cigar." I was like, "No, it's not.
Right.
High proof rye. That's it. Nothing else." And even the
Yeah.
thing
And
with cashmere, the same thing. Someone was like, it was actually one of my Sam Schmeltz's, the former master blender for MGP. So he taught me how to blend along with Nancy Fraley and so on. And I remember I sent it to him. He was like, "Did you finish this in a secondary cask, meaning cashmere?" And I was like, "No." He's like, "Yeah, it's taking on a different nuance." I was like,
mm-hmm.
"No, it's just the way I blended it and how it, came out." So yeah, it's pretty cool.
So how do you go about building a blend? And do you come in with, here's the barrel lots and the flavors, and I think I can make this, or do you have kind of an idea and then you go, search your way into those flavors? Like, what becomes the core concept that drives these things initially?
A lot of things. So I think first off, And here's the other thing, John, is it's also education, right? You're trying to educate the consumer in a manner in which it makes sense. So for me as the blend, I'm trying to do that with my products. So when I did this particular iteration, these are 4 and 7 year barrels that we're using, right? But we want to show the nuances of what they can do. The older that you can go, it takes on a different profile, and so on and so on. For me, the story I was wanting to tell is purity. I wanted to tell versatility. And then when I look at the age statements, I go, okay, 7 years is strong enough for it to carry a certain type of complexity. Okay, 4 years, beautiful and light. So what am I trying to do with it? What do I want to convey to the consumer when I ask them to drink this? And so it's a lot of factors that go into it. And then I think of the end production of that particular SKU, right? Do I want to go citrus floral? Do I want to go dark? Do I want to go rancio? Rancio is an umbrella term of flavor profiles that include things like stone fruit, umami, and leather, and so on and so on. Do I want to go rancio? And I try to step outside of my self-awareness and bias because I love rancio flavor profiles. They're absolutely stunning. I love them in whiskey. And so I look at those particular nuances as well. And then I also push the envelope as well, where I think of that rye enthusiast, what would they like and what would they not like? And then I start to design it that way. So it's all intentional. So much so that by the time you're going to market, you're going to hit that consumer. You're going to get those people on the varying SKUs that we have.
So when you have built these blends, these are the 4 SKUs you have in the market. Are these going to be shelf staples where the flavor profile is going to stay the same, or are you leaning to like a vintage concept where what comes out in Cashmere now, or what comes out in in any of the lines now may not be what it is in 3 years?
So I've decided to do small batch. That's number one. Again, we're reading the room, right? What is the market? We're not trying to flood the market with a whole bunch of rye, right? And let it sit on the shelves. But I'm putting out enough, just enough that it's a healthy flow, a healthy velocity. That's number one. The other thing that I'm trying to do with it is Solstice and Aurora will be kind of like the flagship, right? They'll always be there. And so will Cashmere. Suede was a happy accident, so it's a one and done, unfortunately. Yeah. It's never coming back. Once it's done, it's done. I'm not bringing it back. I could never do it justice. It's such a beautiful profile, and I love it very much. What'll happen is, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You keep going.
What happens is with these particular SKUs, the 3 of them, Solstice, Aurora, and Cashmere, what will happen is they'll stay on the shelf. Like I'd mentioned, the intentionality was to have shelf dominance, and so with that being said, they'll stay inconsistently consistent. So if it's Solstice, then I want light and warmth. It could be we did citrus floral this vintage. The next vintage of 2026 would be, I don't know, fruit, and that sort of thing. If I go Aurora, I want more coffee, and so on and so on. So I'll always change those flavor profiles, but those 3 particular names will stay the same. But I'll operate in small batch and in vintages. So this year's 2026, I'm actually getting ready to produce. Well, actually, I'm about to sell out of Cashmere. It did so well in the market. We no longer have any. I think I'm down to 10 or 18 bottles. That's it in the market, in inventory, because I started out with like 1,200 bottles. So I'm down to about 10 to 18, and that's it.
So you mentioned earlier you have a blending panel. I think you said blending panel or blending team or something along that lines. How do you build out a blending team or a blending panel? Because everybody sort of tastes things differently, and I've heard a lot of people how they've built their groups of people that they kind of put it up against. How do you put yours together, I guess?
So for my blending team, it's kind of different. They're the ones that are pulling my barrels and blending it together. I love them so much because we actually do powwows. At the beginning, we have meetings, and we do the production schedule and so on and so on. And what'll happen is when it's time for Archer Eland to be blended, I'm actually on the floor with the team, and I actually walk them through what I'm thinking, what my goal is. It's imperative to have those inclusive conversations with your team because it gives them a sense of empowerment. And that's what has happened with mine, where we love working with one another because we then come together and then we talk about, okay, what's the game plan for this? What is the goal? What are we looking for? If we run into situations, I know how to fix it, but at the same time, I want to get their input as well. So I've empowered them in that regard when it comes to blending Archer Eland. And then sometimes, they'll ask questions like, well, why are we doing it this way and not that way? And then I explain my thought process as to why. And then we work really, really well together. And then when it comes to like the sensory side of it, I will do distillers, grain, accounting, finance, because you want to, test it on everybody. We all have biological variability. We're not going to taste the same thing. It's just not possible. And so it's kind of unique and cool that we're able to do that here. But I do love my blending team. They're amazing. And, especially when freaking Aurora was having, I was about to have a mental breakdown, and they're like, it's going to be fine. We've done this before. But, me as a, being all green and stuff, they're like, it's going to be okay. There's a lot of ledges that they had to talk, walk me off of. But yeah.
Well, I mean, I think if you're 100% confident all the time, there may be a degree of foolishness involved in that, right? Because there's got to be some degree of grounding in reality. So you've got your own new make laying down, coming up. I think you said this summer.
At the end of the year.
You're using 4 and 7 years. Do you have kind of a max and minimum age range that you're going to kind of stick to, or are we going to see Archer and Eland 17, 18, 20-year rye whiskeys in the future?
7s are, I think they're great for a bargain, right? Like an everyday item. I think it's great. The profiles are beautiful. And then obviously with proofing, you figure out where do you want to hit, and then you get it to where it needs to be. But yes, you are going to see some Archer Elands that are going to be much older. You're going to be seeing some Archer Elands that are completely unexpected. You'll be like, wait, hold on a minute. I thought you said. So I'm very excited about that. I'm excited about all the projects that I have coming down the pipeline. I actually have a limited edition coming out, my first LTO coming out Mother's Day. It's called 14. So that's coming out here real soon. And I play around with 6-year barrels. And you get to see what 6-year barrels do. And 14 is going to be 123 proof. So it's beautiful enough where you can do whatever you want. So I've created a blank canvas. And what's cute about this one is, how women always complain like, oh my God, I want whiskey, I don't want flowers. The design aesthetic is based off around that. So I cannot wait till we debut that so people can see it. But I'm very excited. There's a lot of things that I'm thinking about and working on that are very unique. And I cannot wait to show them to you all.
You and earlier you also mentioned potentially purchasing some finishing casks. Now, I'm not going to ask what finishing casks you purchased, right? Because you're going to develop what you're going to develop. Are there some finishing casks that you're like, absolutely I want to do that, or absolutely I do not ever want to do that?
I do not ever want to do Amberana. I'll tell you that right now.
That was the expectation, because there's a lot of that in the market, and most folks are just sort of tired of it, right? Because it can be an overpowering flavor profile. There's a group of people that love it, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly fine, but
it's very powerful.
It can be abusive.
You have to learn how to use it in the right way. I can only think of maybe two people that have used Amberana, and I've tasted it in finish for Irish whiskey. It's stunning. It's great. Only you needed was 5% of it. Yeah. And so it was beautiful. But if you catch me doing some Amberana, call me on my BS, and I will take accountability for it. But I'll never do Amberana.
Yeah. No. Well, I think I would trust that if you decided to do Amberana, it's because you found something unique to do with it, right?
Exactly.
There can be a place for it to exist. We were in Denver last May, and it was me and a group of other whiskey nerds, and one of my friends who's also a podcast host. We tried something at Stranahan's, and we didn't know what it was. It was just one of their unique things that they had going on, and he's like, I really, really like this. And I leaned over and asked the bartender, I was like, what was it? And he kind of showed me what it was all finished in, and one of them was Amberana, and he is an extreme advocate for not liking Amberana. I'm like, you found one? And he was like, no. And so we pulled it up and looked at it. And so there are places where it can play and it can be fine, but there's
a time and a place. And I'm not saying there's something wrong with finishing.
Right.
I just want to tell the story of purity. I want to tell the story of the transcendence of time. And I know I sound like a weird nerd, but I've been doing it long enough to know that I really want to unfold the story. I want people to understand what does 4 years in rye look like? What does 7 and 6 and so on in rye? Because everyone's just going, well, why am I going to pay so much money for 6 years? But it's like, you need to understand that it's 6 years and I'm showing you what 4 is like. Now you get to see what 6 is like. Now you get to see what 8 is like. Then once you have that foundational, then we can go into finishes. Then we can go into all the
And you know
crazy
what
stuff that
you
can
know
be
what
done.
you know where your spot is, right? Because everybody
Yes.
has kind of a different. You say, there's biological variability from how we taste things, but then there's also just reference material. The things
Yeah.
that I've tasted that have a banana flavor are going to be different than the things that you've tasted that have a banana flavor. And finding the things you like, whether it's 4 or 6 or 8 or 10 or 12
Yes.
or 2 or whatever it happens to be, it's an interesting thing. And don't worry, this is the place for the weird nerds. The weird nerds are all going to be the ones that are
Yes.
listening
I'm
and
like,
hearing
I'm
this
so
anyway. So
sorry if I nerd out a
yeah,
little bit, but
no,
I'm very
this is the
passionate
audience.
about that.
Yeah, these are the weirdos that are going to be like, well, where did you source your rye from, and who does your malting, right? And what field was it grown in, and what was the rain like that year?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
there's all those things.
I always find it fascinating when people ask those questions, and it's like, okay, but then if I answer that question, you're going to understand and how you're going to apply it in the future. There's some people that just kind of want to catch you and stuff,
Right.
whatever. And then there's some people that are genuinely interested in that. And that's why I was like, you know what? I've been blessed and I've been given an opportunity to tell the story through my lens. And it's such a diverse lens that I have that I know I can appeal to a lot of people. And with rye being such a difficult thing to distill as well, and the difficulty in it in blending it, and like I said, at 100% with no other grain, it's a gift to be able to do that. It's a gift that I've been given, and I want to do justice by it. And I also want to honor my mother in a good way by doing this as well. But yeah, the rye enthusiast, and then to all those people that don't like it, we have something for you. I
Yeah.
can catch you somewhere at 104, 110, 126. And the proofs will change, by the way. They're not always going to stay this way.
It's always the thing of a person who says, I don't like XYZ thing.
Yes.
You don't know. You just don't like the one that you've already had, or the 2 or the 3.
Exactly.
There's any number of things. When I was a kid, I didn't like Brussels sprouts, but that's because the version of Brussels sprouts I had wasn't very good. And
Right.
then I had
I didn't
some
like
when I was
asparagus
like,
until I had it. Yeah.
right. And when I was like 19, I had a completely different. This can be good, right? There's
Right.
variations out there.
And there are people that are stuck in their ways as well. And even like when I do tastings in stores, when you do tastings, it's the easiest way to get liquid to lips, right? But at the same time, it's also a beautiful sociological experiment to be able to kind of determine the consumer. And you see them. You get to watch them and you get to see their reaction. You get to see the type of person that's purchasing a certain type of thing. And I take those things into consideration and into account as well, right?
Yeah.
Because that also helps me develop the demographic that I'm going for. And then there are those people that are just kind of like the typical, sorry, again, taters who are running in, for, the green label, the red label, or whatever the case may be. But it's a fascinating thing to kind of witness and take that into consideration. And so how I've started, kind of navigating this space as well is everything that I encounter or go through is going to be a tool. It's an experiential tool to help me get better, become more knowledgeable than I am right now. And it helps me navigate this space a little bit better, and that's kind of, it's an interesting perspective, to be honest with you. And I'm enjoying it. I mean, it's a humble pie, but I'm enjoying it.
Well, I mean, it's an incredible journey. There's an incredible amount of things that have happened in a very short amount of time. And I know it's felt like an eternity for you, but you're saying this all started post-COVID and it's only 2026. In 6 years,
6 years.
There's quite a journey that has happened here. Like that's really impressive. And it's a testament to work ethic and to intellect and to intentionality and a whole host of things. I don't think we've mentioned where someone would go to buy your whiskey if they wanted to. We probably need to talk about, because I am getting up on the end of the time that I have available at this point. And so I want to make sure we need to sell something, right?
Yeah, let's sell some stuff. Come
Right.
get Aurora. So Archer Eland is available, obviously, in the state of Ohio. I have 25 stores. It's a controlled state, so they help you kind of open up that way. So it's available in 25 stores in the state of Ohio. You can actually look it up on OHLQ to see what stores have them. And then we also have Middle West Spirits is also carrying Archer Eland at their Cortland location. That's the distillery and the restaurant as well. And they also have a bottle shop there. All 4 SKUs are there. We also have it online. If you go to shop.middlewestspirits.com, you're available to get that. And I know for a fact that we do ship to Kentucky because people have been hitting me up. I do ship to Kentucky. And so you're able to get that there as well. And like I said, cashmere is probably going to be gone by the end of the month. And then
Mhm.
what will stand in its stead is suede. We'll get
Mhm.
suede out there. I'll take it out of allocation so everybody has a chance to have a one of a kind collection. And again, I'm curating collections. It's not something where it's going to be the same thing all the time.
Right. So everybody should buy a bottle this year and then another one next year, and then they can compare them to each other, and then the year
Yeah,
after that, and just keep doing it. It's a
yeah,
great pull through strategy. Wendy, thank you so much for the time you've given. I made it through
absolutely. It was a
about a
joy to speak
third of
with
the
you.
questions I had, and so we'll have to talk again.
For
You've
sure,
got
absolutely.
some LTOs coming up, and make sure that we're giving you an appropriate amount of attention so folks can be aware of what you guys have going on and making sure they're picking up things.
Thank you
And thank
so
you so
much. I
much.
appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Embellish Pod. If you enjoyed this, please leave me a review on whatever platform you're consuming this on. Leave a comment if at all possible. Hit me up on social media on TikTok or Instagram using @EmbellishPod, and you can give me a follow so you can get what's going on here and my website. I can also be found at my website at www.embellishpod.com. And there you'll have some links there, some accounts, some contact details, maybe some music reviews or some cocktail recipes or whatever else I happen to write about. Thanks for stopping by.